Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent Labrada and another very special guest who we'll be announcing in a second. But first, we do want to let you guys know that you can find us on all major social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, as well as all major podcast platforms by searching the Dog Trainers Podcast. With that, I want to give a quick shout out to some people that have been showing us love. We're getting a lot of downloads from Centennial, Colorado, Los Angeles, California, Boston, Massachusetts, and Stockholm in Sweden. That's kind of cool. And yeah, we thank you guys so much for your support. We thank you so much for all the hard work and you give us in questions, and we have one to bring up in just a bit here. And we really, really just want to thank you guys so much for keeping us motivated to keep doing these interviews and keep talking with other trainers and progress this thing forward. So with that, over to you, Brent.
Hey guys, how's it going? This is episode 45. Welcome, guys. I hope you guys had a good time listening to our episode with Jonas Black, episode 44. We've been getting a lot of comments and DMs from you guys, but that was last week's news. We love Jonas. He's the man. Let's talk about today's special guest. He is the owner of packmasters.com. He is also, you can follow him at Larry Krohn. I just gave away who it is. And he's also the author of Everything You Need to Know About E-Collar Training. We'd like to welcome our very special guest, Larry Krohn. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure, man. It's our pleasure. And as you guys know, we like to bring on, we're very grateful to all the special guests that agree to be on this podcast because, they're able to share with us their experience, their knowledge, their little tidbits of growth that will help inspire us to become a better industry. And so we really, really appreciate you being on, Larry. Going into this podcast, I've personally followed you for many, many years. Obviously being in the business and working with dogs every single day, like it is sometimes a gift to be able to like take a day and study someone else. Cause sometimes you're just in the grind. Sure. You're working with clients, you're teaching classes, whatever it is. And then anytime I have a break, it's funny, on my vacations, that's when I study, on my breaks, that's when I study. And so especially building a business, it just works out that way. And so over the last couple of years, your videos, your books, your content has always been something that I've pulled lots of value from. And yeah, it's the truth. It's the truth. And so, I guess I don't necessarily know where to start, but I guess let's go ahead and start from the beginning if we can. I guess tell people who, a lot of people who know who you are, who are going to be listening to this. But let's go ahead and tell people who you are, what you do, and what your story a little bit. Let's tell them your story, about how you got into dog training.
It's pretty nothing exciting, not very sexy. It's like a lot of people, when me and my wife first got married and we got our first dog, I was working down on the Mexican border. I just started my career as a federal agent. We got a puppy literally on the Mexican border. This border collie jumped my buddy's fence and bred his chocolate lab, and we had a lab border collie mix. We had no kids. I knew nothing, and we completely destroyed that dog. We really put that dog through hell mentally because we treated him like our child. We didn't know what we were doing, and he was everything to us. Really intelligent dog. Dog lived for a Frisbee, and we enjoyed it. But some of the stories, I could write a book on just some of the comical stories with what that dog did to us. It was just bad. So I knew right away, he was probably 5 months old, and I hired a trainer. And when I get involved in something, I become kind of consumed, obsessed, and insane about learning as much as I can. And I'm so grateful that the first trainer I worked with was really focused on behavior, and he had the best behaved dog I had ever seen. And so from that moment, that's all I cared about. That's what I wanted. I didn't care about obedience and bite work and, fancy healing
stuff.
I just wanted a really well-behaved dog. So to make a long story short, it wasn't long after that we got another dog. We added a Rottweiler to our family, and that's what I really just focused on. So for many years, I think what makes me a little better with some of the tools, especially the e-collars. I trained for a really long time with just a leash and a flat collar.
Yeah.
That was it. There was nothing else. I didn't use food up until literally not that long ago. You know, it was just all building that relationship and building the behavior. And you know, we had really good dogs. We really did. It was funny because we got that first dog and we lived in an apartment. We weren't allowed to have dogs. And I went ahead and got the puppy anyway. And we were in Arizona, so there was a lot of snowbirds, they call them, old people that would come down from the north and spend the winter down by us, right?
Right.
And so every day I'd have to take that little puppy and visit all the old people. They loved him, and he loved meeting all the people. And he'd go and just meet, and they were so happy. And then one day I get a knock on our door, and I open it, and it's the superintendent of the apartments. And he goes, "Hey, heard you got a puppy." I was like, "I do." He's like, "Can I see him?" I was like, "Sure." And the puppy comes out and he's rolling around on the floor, like probably spent half hour playing with the puppy. He's like, "All right, thanks for letting me play with the puppy."
Yeah.
we never had an issue, you know, but we did create, the dog struggled with separation anxiety so bad just because of the things we did in the beginning. It really affected him.
How old was the puppy before you seeked out help professionally?
5 months old.
Okay.
5 months. Okay.
Yeah, because he was already struggling. Listen, I remember coming home from work one day and we had him fenced in the kitchen, right? Didn't use a crate because he would scream. That's what I thought you should do, right? And, you know, like the protein meal replacements like Metrics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I remember I had a case of vanilla Perfect RX on the floor in my bedroom. And I walked into my house and the kitchen was across the room and I see the gate knocked over and I see white footprints everywhere.
Like it snowed inside your house.
All over my house. And now I'm pissed. I am furious. My apartment was destroyed. And then all of a sudden I look over and he comes running out and he was black. He was jet black. All I could see is his eyes. He was covered with white powder.
With white powder.
That was it.
He's
and
just
I just, you know, I had to laugh, and I knew from that day on we got to do something here. You know, so he's the dog that really started it all for us. He really did.
Okay. Were you guys down? So you said you were working at the border. Were you down like in Yuma?
No, I was in Douglas, Arizona.
Oh, okay. I'm in. Are you still in Arizona?
No, I'm in Kentucky now. I came to Kentucky in 1999, and I just retired this week. Actually, I'm done.
Oh, congratulations!
Thanks.
What are you gonna do with all your time?
Train a puppy.
Man. Yeah, I got a puppy. I got a puppy.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it was a blessing that, you know, I wasn't turned on to someone using e-collars and stuff like that, especially back then. You know, in the mid 90s, because things were used very differently. And if I would have first met someone that trained with those tools, I think I'd be a much different trainer today.
For sure.
Yeah.
I had a question for you that it comes up a lot, right? And so I'll tell you my own personal perspective growing up in the dog training industry, because you know, there's kind of these different worlds, right? And we're not talking about methods necessarily, but there is this idea of behavior, and then there's idea of obedience, right? And in some situations, there's kind of an overlap, like where behavior affects obedience affects behavior, vice versa.
Sure.
Would you mind giving the audience kind of your definition of what do you mean by behavior training, and then what is your definition of obedience training?
If I had to make it really short and really simple, I would say behavior is silent and obedience is verbal. Yeah. You know, obedience is do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And behavior is just being proper, you know, living
coexisting,
in the moment, living together and doing the right thing properly. If I had to put in a real, and I train them, I do it separately. I separate those two things very much so, you know, I really do. But you know, the emphasis for me is on the behavior always.
Right. And it's kind of like how our behaviors affect the dog's behavior in general, right? Because it's kind of the dog's only going to learn to do what we allow them to learn to do. And that has, right. So that's a great definition. Cool. And I think that I hear you talk a lot about in some of your videos, how, you know, obedience is great, behavior is in your opinion the primary, right? And so we saw a couple people in the last 20, 30 years come up with different, approaches to training. And there's this wide menu of places to pick from, right? Where do we start, right? Are we starting with marker training? Are we starting with obedience? Are we starting with protection? Are we starting with specialty dogs and tricks? Are we starting with behavior? Are we starting? So there's so many areas, and especially in what's considered to be the balanced dog training world, we see that it's kind of all like meshed together.
That is a tough question, because I do notice it's kind of hard to start obedience without also starting behavior. And it's kind of, it's so much easier to start behavior. I just had a couple of, so I'm currently in Phoenix, just to give you like an idea.
Oh, I love Phoenix.
I love Phoenix too. I'm so glad that I moved here. I've only been here for, actually, once we get into April, it'll be my second year here, and I'm loving it.
Hey, you ever been to Barrio Cafe?
I think I've heard of it. Where, remind me where.
Oh Lord, listen, you gotta, you gotta go.
I'm gonna tell them Larry sent me. I'll go.
Yeah, I was in Phoenix last month, and I met a buddy of mine, a good friend that lives in Phoenix, and the best guacamole on the face of the earth. The queso fundido is over the top insane. The menudo, some of the best I ever had. You gotta go.
What's the place called again? What's the place called?
Barrio Cafe.
Barrio Cafe. Okay, I'm gonna try that. And
I want to say it was on 16th Street. It wasn't far from the airport.
I think I passed it because I'm not too far from the airport either. Next time you're in town, let me know. I'm gonna take you to Avanti. It's the best Italian I've ever had.
Oh, nice.
Super, super good.
Yeah. But you're welcome, Barrio Cafe. This episode is brought to you by
I know.
Cafe.
But to get back on track, so I definitely want to talk a little bit more about, I'm just going to plant this in your head now just because it popped into mind. So as you talk about the importance of learning the types of training that you learned in the sequence that you did, because if you had started with tools back in the day where e-collar training was something totally different, it may have totally shifted you around as a trainer. So I'd love to touch a little more about, is that something that you notice with today's like younger trainers? Because there's so much with YouTube and so many people go like straight to e-collar and, and all that good stuff. Do you think that there's something to do with that? Like, should people be learning in a certain sequence, food or behavior or whatever, and then?
That is an outstanding question. And I think one of the biggest problems we have today is if you're a young trainer and you're just coming up, your future pretty much depends on who you start following, right?
Mm.
You start following the wrong people from the start, you're going to be hurting and you don't know it. You think you're doing great and you feel real good about yourself and you become very cocky and very arrogant because this is what this person that's so important in your life does. And they're so popular and they have all these followers. So it has to be the right thing to do. And it's one of the biggest issues we have today. The problem is some of the people out there that need to be the teachers, the people that should be looked up to, aren't necessarily big
attention
people on social media.
Yeah,
right. Some of them aren't even on social media, and that's a problem. That's why for me, I try to promote the people that I still study from, that I still follow, that I learn from, and the majority of that comes from the working dog world.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest issues we have in the pet dog industry is that they ignore the working dog side of the world. And that's a tremendous, tremendous mistake, because the second that light bulb went in my head and that ignition was lit, that fire was lit when I first encountered the working dog people, it changed the way I train forever. And it made me a much better dog trainer.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the next time you're in town, check out Sean Thomas. He runs the kennel, The Good Dog, out in Gilbert, and he and his dogs, his Schutzen dogs, they do very well.
Is it Good Dog or Top Dogs?
It's Top Dog. I'm so sorry, Top Dog.
Top Dogs. I was like, Good Dog is Sean.
You're right. Top Dog in Gilbert. Okay, so then, you know what? Let's take this opportunity now then, because I know exactly what you're saying. A lot of the more like academically, what's the word? A lot of the more accomplished actual dog trainers aren't as like tech savvy as a lot of the more like modern dog trainers. So tell us a little bit about some of your mentors, if you could.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call them mentors. I
Okay.
definitely have influences.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, I think the mentor thing. If you're fortunate enough to spend, a really large amount of time with someone, uh, months at a time, year at a time, couple years at a time, that's a big thing. But I don't think the dog training world operates much like that anymore.
Got
Things
it.
are very different, and it's because of the access to people through social media.
Right.
Doesn't have to be, right? So that first dog trainer that I worked with, that's literally the last pet dog trainer that I ever worked with. Like
Okay.
that was it. I'm the kind of person that doesn't just take something and then jump onto the next thing. I focused on getting great what I learned from him as much as I could, right? And coming into that, I despised e-collars because as a little kid, I was a hunter. I was a big bird hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, you're talking 40 years ago, 40 something years ago,
Right.
guys had bird dogs off leash with e-collars on, and it was brutal.
Right.
You'd
Right.
hear dogs screaming all through the woods in New
Right.
Jersey on state land running. And I never saw a dog cooperate the way they did. I saw a lot of dogs screaming.
Mhm.
So I despised the use of e-collars for a really long time, you know? And so I guess I was training probably about 12 to 15 years, just leash and flat collar, no food, no nothing. And I did real well behavioral wise. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
teach dogs much when it came to obedience, just the basic things. And in, I guess, around 2010, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there was the first time I ever met Bart Ballone. Bart Ballone he came back to the States for the first time and did a seminar in Virginia. And it completely changed the way I looked at dog training. I started using food because I'm not an idiot. To me, using food was stupid bullshit, like PetSmart stuff.
Right.
But when I saw people like Bart and Michael Ellis using food, they said, well, if these guys that are on top of the game are using food, I have to be missing something.
Right.
And the second I added that to my training, again, made a huge difference. It made everything better, made everything easier.
Yep.
It really did.
Right.
And from that one time, I became obsessed with taking everything I learned from that one time, and I kept going back every time I had the opportunity to be at a Bart seminar or something. I would learn something new, and I would just implement it into my training, even though it was mostly pet dogs. But the working dog stuff that I learned provided tons of benefits for me with pet dogs, especially the problem dogs.
Right. Right.
And then when I got Luca, that was in 2012, 2011, 2012. I was able to start really focusing on the working dog stuff on my side.
Is that the
trying to
Roddy?
get better at
Luca's
it?
the Roddy?
No, Luca's the Malinois.
Oh,
Bruno
okay.
was my Rottweiler right before Luca.
Got it.
Bruno was best trained dog I ever had, and that dog was trained on a leash and a walk. That was it.
Yep.
There was never any food, no tools, no nothing. Bruno was 4 or 5 years old the first time I ever put an e-collar on him. And that's, I was, just getting introduced to using it in a different way and starting to be open-minded to it, you know. But that working dog stuff is what changed everything for me. It really did.
I couldn't agree with you more. Can I ask you a bit of a technical question? Because for me, it was a similar thing. So my background is similar-ish to yours, including the fact that I actually started with dogs in the Air Force. And that's obviously a whole new world, and pet dog training with clients. And, that being said, I met Brent in LA. We worked a lot of leash pressure stuff at the time using food rewards. However, when I got more into working dog, sport dog stuff, I really learned the true benefit of using food as lures and more in a direct motivational sense, and not just as like, oh, here you go, you're done with the sit down, heel, whatever. So I guess my question to you then is I totally agree with you that more dog trainers could really benefit from learning a lot of sport dog stuff. Is there a certain thing or a couple things that really point out to you? Like, if you're listening to this, look into the sport dog world and pay attention to X.
Y or Z?
That's a tough question. I think it's the basic communication between the animal.
Okay.
So even people in the pet dog world that use food and use toys, when you watch a lot of it, they don't understand how the dog learns. And what I mean by that is they tend to make it a very fuzzy picture for the dog. So holding a piece of food up and asking the dog to sit and then giving them a piece of food, that is pet smart stuff. That is bribery. That's not training, you know, but having the dog perform and activate you to produce the reward is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Right.
You know, I mean, and it's simple things like that and the timing with everything. And a big part of the thing is so many people assume the dog knows a lot more than they do.
1,000. Right.
Yeah.
And they jump into punishment so fast.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I'm most told when I do a seminar, like take this seminar I just did in Amarillo a few weeks ago, like people were really shocked on how much leeway I gave dogs without using any kind of punishment. And what I had to explain to them was I'd give them little tests. I said, okay, so you think we should punish the dog for that? They said, yeah, well, the dog's not complying. I said, okay, I want you to do something. And I would have them, you know, give the command without any movement from their body or do little things.
Right.
You know, or even if it was a marker, a reward marker or a release command.
Right.
And the dog, every single time, 100%, the dogs would do nothing. They'd be looking because they didn't really know the words, the commands, the behaviors. And it's very eye-opening for people when they see that.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when you're a dog trainer and you have, you know, say 5 to 10 years in, including myself, you're learning so much because everything's new and you think you're hot shit. You think you know everything. I know I did. I really thought I knew everything. I was like, there's nothing else to learn.
How many years are you in now, Larry?
25.
No big deal. Just 20.
Yeah. and you do. You think you know everything. And then you get with the right person and you're like, holy shit.
You're like, I don't know shit. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I don't know that much. And then 15 to 20 years in, you're like, wow, I know nothing.
Right.
I know maybe 5% of what there is to know in dog training. There's a hell of a lot more that I don't know than I do know.
So
and that's why I'm obsessed constantly with learning, obsessed with it.